This is a special meeting of the Redmond City Council held on Tuesday, June 27, 2023, commencing at 6:40 p.m. Council members in attendance are Council President Forsyth, Council Vice President Kritzer, Council Member Anderson, Council Member Carson, and Council Member Stewart. The community can attend council meetings in person, view meetings on Facebook Live, YouTube, RCTV, Comcast Channel 21 or 321, or Ziply Channel 34, or listen live by calling 510-335-7371. Jackie Lawler, Staff Liaison, will introduce the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee candidate. Ms. Lawler.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council, and thank you for your time. Tonight, I am pleased to introduce Jeff Eisenberg for your consideration to finish out a recently vacated committee seat. This vacancy is for a partial term that runs through March 2024, and if approved, he would be eligible to serve his first four-year term on the LTAC in 2024. Mr. Eisenberg is currently the general manager of the Redmond Hilton Garden Inn, where he started 4 years ago. He has served as a hospitality professional for over 20 years with a career that has included various manager roles across the country, including the Four Seasons in Hawaii and Boston and the Pan Pacific Hotel in Seattle. I believe Mr. Eisenberg's extensive hospitality background and his willingness to serve will be a wonderful addition to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, and I'll now turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you so much. We have two candidates this evening for two different commissions, and we have about 10 minutes each just to make sure we don't have a ton of time, but I know that you received all of the materials via email to see their backgrounds. So are there any questions to open it up? Council President.
Sure, I will kick us off. So great to meet you. Thank you for being here and applying for this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So how will you work to uphold activities on the LTAC that benefit the good of Redmond?
Well, we're very proud to have opened during COVID 3 years ago, and kind of when nothing was happening. Since then, we've tried to really continue to be a part of the Redmond community. So my job is to just kind of be able to join on this board, listen to everybody, listen to recommendations, but also talk to the other leaders and people that represent Redmond, and focus on just continuing the upswing and the continuous busyness that we're getting in the middle.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eisenberg, and congratulations, of course,
Thank you.
on the business and applying for this position. I'm curious if you've worked with committees like this in other capacities, whether serving on or adjacent to in other cities, and if so, what makes it successful?
I have never served on a committee like this before. I was in downtown Seattle. I've been in Seattle area since 2012. So obviously I saw the $2 tax that helped downtown, and I've talked to people involved with it. I saw a lot of the good that it did for downtown Seattle. So while I haven't served on a committee like that before, I'd love to be part of the same thing to make it even more successful out here in Redmond.
Mm-hmm. And I guess then, what are you most excited about in terms of the role?
I think just getting the city of Redmond's name out there. I mean, I feel even for me, working downtown hotels most of the time that I've been here until I moved to this hotel 4 years ago. I lived out in Ballard before. I didn't really know much about Redmond, to be honest, until I started coming out here. And it's an amazing city. I mean, it has a lot of the it's only a couple exits past Bellevue, and it's really accessible from anywhere. And then with the light rail coming in, it's going to even be more accessible. But it's so easy to get to Woodinville and Bellevue and even downtown from this area. And it's beautiful, and it's super safe, and just the amount of greenery and trees and stuff out here is just, it was kind of mind-boggling that I didn't know about anything out here until I spent a lot of time out here.
I can definitely appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Council Vice President Kritzer.
Well, good questions from my fellow council members. Thank you so much for being here and for applying to serve. I'm curious to know when you think about what are some of the most impactful activities and areas that could be funded by the LTAC in terms of supporting the hospitality industry. What are the ones that you see as the most impactful?
I'd have to really dig into that a little bit more and look at everything, but I think any type of activities that you can bring out here, whether it's sports, corporate business, there's enough business and enough room for everything to come in here. So every little piece of business helps, and it's a small enough city where, you know, I think we're trying to benefit everything, not just my hotel, not just the Marriott or the Archer, but all the businesses, Redmond Town Center, all these things. So if you bring these groups in, whether it's sports, whether it's concerts, whether it's partnering with Woodinville, things like that, trips down there, it's just going to benefit everything. But there's a need for everything because our weekend business struggles non-summer. So you obviously need to figure out how to get some leisure stuff in there, and then besides corporations, we can't just rely solely on Microsoft to be the sole provider for Redmond.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Carson?
Thank you. So I'm curious, what one skill of yours do you think will serve you well in working with the committee to kind of work on events and not on events, but on granting of events funds to bring people here for the kind of travel you're talking about, leisure and.
Absolutely. I think it's my passion. Hospitality is not for everybody. And it's one of those, I truly don't think you do a disservice to hospitality if you're not in it 100%. So I never go into a position, when I took this position at Hilton Garden in Redmond, it'd be a disservice if I wasn't fully 100% into it and wanted to succeed. I love the industry, and that means I want to see the hospitality industry succeed. And again, that's just not my hotel. I just want to see all hospitality succeed. But so I'm very passionate. I do listen, but also fight for something I believe in. So if it's something that I passionately believe in and I have good reasoning, I will do everything I can to make that happen.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, for the questions. Thank you so much for applying for this and being here tonight. And I'm not seeing any objection to your appointment. So we will have you on the consent agenda on July 5th and look forward to your participation in LTAC. And I know Ms. Lawler is very excited to have a member to fill that vacant seat. So thank you so much. Really excited to have you on board.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And next, we're going to switch gears, and we're going to welcome Samet Bordeloy up to the table. And I think Red is on, so that mic is on. And we have online Alaric Bien, our staff liaison, will introduce our Human Services Committee candidate. Alaric.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I really apologize for not being there in person. I'm flying out tomorrow on a trip, and I still can't find the suitcase that I need, but otherwise I would be there. I really want to, I'm just so happy to introduce Samet Bordeloy. He's the Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion Manager for Snow Isle Libraries, which really helps us and speaks to our emphasis in human services at the City of Redmond over the last few funding cycles on equity in our funding decisions, and I think he'll bring a lot to those conversations. He has multiple degrees in social work, couples and family therapy, and a doctorate in human development and family studies. He's lived in Redmond with his family for just a little over 2 years. His son just graduated from the first grade at Redmond Elementary, and he loves to walk. He walks a lot. He only drives maybe once or twice a week, he told me. And on these walks, he sees a lot in our community, exploring his neighborhood and downtown. He's noticed, the homeless youth at Friends of Youth, really close to where he lives, the diversity of the community, and also he's noticed the lack of independent, small mom and pop type businesses in the city. I think one of the things that really impressed me the most, or really stuck with me, is how eloquently he spoke about gaining his legal permanent residency last year and how that changed his perspective on his community after having lived here in the U.S. for 11 or 12 years. It was really the first time that he felt like he belonged, and I think that really will help us with our human services strategic planning, or strategic plan, which emphasizes belonging and welcoming as well. And I think he'll just be a great addition to our Human Services Commission. So I will let Samet speak for himself.
Great.
Thank you so much, Alaric. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome. Also had a wonderful interview with you, and I'm really excited to have our council ask you some questions. And so I'll open it up to all of you. Council Vice President Kritzer.
Well, I will just kick it off by asking you, why do you want to serve on the Human Services Commission, and what excites you about the opportunity?
So I was, until last year in July, I was an associate professor in human services at Western Washington University. So I've basically spent my life, majority of my professional life. I was a professional graduate student until very late. My parents reminded me of that quite a lot. And then I was an academic, because once you're a professional grad student, you can't do anything else. So I taught human services for a long time. I have been involved in nonprofit work and human services work my entire lifetime. As Alric pointed out, I have lived in the United States for 18 years. This is the first place that feels like home. So this is the first time that I feel the desire, the commitment to the community to give back. And, part of it was obviously related to getting permanent residency. But a big part is that, as my partner likes to remind me, that I would have to drag her dead body out of here because she loves it so much out here. So, yeah, I see myself as being able to provide a perspective that I think, comes from both life experience and the professional experience. So.
Other questions? Councilmember Stewart.
Well, thank you so much for your application and your willingness to serve. Obviously, you have so much professional overlap with this role. I mean, it might not even be overlap. You have so much relevant experience for the role. Some folks like to volunteer outside of their profession, and maybe someone like you would, be coaching t-ball or something outside of what you do all day. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you intend to navigate both like your professional role that you have in your day job and then being a volunteer advisor here in this capacity as a commissioner?
Yeah, I think there's, I don't see it as a big division out there, because partly it's been an identity thing. This is what I have done my entire life. Yes, I serve as the EDI manager for Snow Isle Libraries, and there's considerable amount of overlap that happens, but human services work is different. Human services work from a city's perspective is very different. Long term, I do see myself actually working in local or state government at some point. Mm-hmm. I also see this as a wonderful way of looking at how does a city tackle some big, really what I consider sticky problems, right? Like these problems don't disappear, even when you think about it in terms of throwing in a lot of funding. So having spent a lot of time teaching students how to go about tackling that as human services workers, I want to be part of something where I can give larger recommendations and see whether some of those work. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to having you help inform some decisions moving forward, but also, I think there's also more to learn here. I'm hearing you say you're just going to continue to be that lifelong graduate student, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Forsyth.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for applying, as everyone else has said. I think you're one of the most qualified for this role that we've seen so far. So I'm curious to know, one of the biggest things that you will be bringing forward to council is funding recommendations for human services. And how do you see your role in your professional world and your role on the commission? How do you see that influencing the funding recommendations?
Yeah, so I think the biggest element so I'm trained as a systems thinker. That's what I got trained in. And when I approach problems, I approach it from a systems perspective. For example, I think the big issue out here in Redmond, and I love this place, is affordability, right? Like my partner and I, we make really good money. We also recognize if one of us doesn't have a job, we might not be able to live out here. Right, so I think the median household income in Redmond is about $142,000. Yet we know that there's a huge percentage of the population that lives here that doesn't make that money. Right, so to me, that's a structural problem that we have to solve now. Right, and I think that's what I would bring. I would bring a systems perspective to each of those elements. When I give recommendations, when I work on problems, my biggest question is, how does this step enhance the life of the most vulnerable amongst us. So I start with that basic principle, and then I try to build a solution to that.
Great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our candidate this evening? I don't see any. Well, thank you again for applying for this. I am not seeing any concern about you being appointed. Our next business meeting is July 5th. It's a Wednesday because 4th of July is a Tuesday. We're not going to meet that day. But you will be on the consent agenda for approval, and you can come that evening and be sworn in, or our Cheryl Xanthos, who's up in our clerk up there, will arrange with you to swear you in at another time if you can't make it that evening. So very excited to have you on board. Thank you, Council, for your great questions this evening. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.